There comes a morning when the weight of your own body feels like a mountain. You wake, stare at what you swore you'd conquer, and the thought of even beginning tastes sour. The gym bag sits like a judgment. The phone hums with 1,000 tiny escapes, notifications whispering, "Just rest, you've earned it." You scroll, drift, repeat, convincing yourself that you simply need a spark, a better playlist, a new reason. But somewhere deeper, you can hear the quiet dishing of it, the truth that strength is being stolen not by exhaustion, but by hesitation. The body isn't broken, it's merely Arnold. You kneel in the soft light of morning, shoulders heavy with invisible excuses, and that's when the mind splits open, one part pleading for comfort, the other remembering what men before you called discipline. Centuries ago in the mist of Japan, a lone samurai tied his armor straps in silence. Before the noise of swords or orders, he sat perfectly still, eyes closed, breath rising like smoke. His heartbeat was steady, not because he felt ready, but because he refused to wait for it. The world told him to rest, but the warrior never mistook rest for readiness. He knew readiness was a creation, carved moment by moment, strike by strike. Where modern men stole in search of inspiration, the old ones found it in motion. You can almost see him bare feet on cold stone, sword resting at his side. No playlist, no caffeine, no motivational slogans, just a trembling breath before the first step. In that space between fear and action existed his real training, to move though the soul resisted. Today, we've learned to bow to emotion rather than command it. We confuse fatigue with weakness, distraction with need, comfort with recovery. We glorify wanting to be strong while quietly negotiating our way out of the very struggle that would make us so. The samurai didn't call himself motivated. He called himself prepared, not by feeling powerful, but by acting powerfully when every instinct whispered retreat. The difference between men who drift and men who evolve begins here, in the moment you feel incapable yet move anyway. Because you aren't meant to wait for readiness. You're meant to discipline yourself into it. Weakness isn't the signal to stop. It's a forge where strength finally hardens. Every generation must relearn this truth. Most battles are won not by the man who feels strongest, but by the one who keeps moving through the dust. Today's battlefield isn't a field of blade, but a screen of light, a war for attention and presence. And while the world scrolls, waiting to feel worthy, the modern warrior breathes, stands, and acts, shaping himself through motion while his weakness begs him to pause. This is where transformation always hides, not when you are full of vigor, but when you have nothing left to offer but breath and direction. You break or you begin, and both happen at the same edge. To answer how to train when you feel weak, we must return to the old road to Japan, where weakness wasn't avoided. It was polished. Burnout isn't always born of effort. Most often, it's a quiet corrosion that comfort leaves behind. What you call exhaustion might actually be withdrawal. From stimulation, from constant ease, from the endless buffet of cheap dopamine. You think you're tired because you've worked too much, but look closer. You're drained because you consumed too much and created too little. Every scroll, every notification, every mild indulgence promises renewal, but steals discipline one subtle sigh at a time. We've built a world where rest is mutated into avoidance and convenience has disguised itself as care. The modern man believes he is exhausted, but what he truly feels is a decay of unused potential. The muscles ache not from lifting but from stillness. The spirit groans not from effort but from neglect. The grand enemy of this age doesn't arrive with threat or alarm. It whispers in soft tones. Take it easy. You deserve a break. But the more the body bends to ease, the less it remembers endurance. Comfort, in excess, is decay disguised as peace that I in the old way. This enemy didn't exist in the same form. The samurai knew luxury was a slow poison. They didn't chase relaxation. They courted stillness. The world says, I need motivation. But the warrior says, I need clarity. Motivation depends on mood. Clarity is carved from intention. That distinction separated the fleeting from the formidable. The modern man looks for sparks outside himself. The ancient one struck them within the cave of his own breath. When the samurai trained beyond fatigue, they weren't glorifying pain, they were sculpting focus, refining perception, cutting through the illusion that emotion governs action. They cultivated what the Zen masters called mushin, no mind, a state where exhaustion, doubt, and self-conscious fear emptied out like smoke through an open door. Stillness was an escape. It was a furnace where all mental noise burned away. That there's a small story told of a young trainee of Miyamoto Musashi. One night he complained he was too tired to train. Musashi looked at him without judgment and simply said, "Then sit until the body dissolves from the breath." At dawn, the student remained there, aching, still every excuse consumed by silence. When Musashi returned, he found not a warrior refreshed, but a man reborn, his exhaustion gone, his mind sharpened, his posture unshakable. What happened in those hours wasn't recovery but revelation. The body follows a command of the mind, and the mind follows a command of attention. Weakness persisted only until he stopped identifying with it. That we mistaken activity for movement and stimulation for life. The samurai understood something we've forgotten. When the soul grows cluttered, motion without stillness only multiplies confusion. They trained to quiet the noise until action arose clear and pure, like water moving downstream without resistance. Mushin wasn't about suppressing thought. It was about seeing through it, moving forward without dragging the weight of doubt along. That's the true difference between the modern and the warrior mind. One waits to feel capable. The other becomes capable by entering stillness first. In our time, burnout is a spiritual version of rust. It tells you progress is impossible when, in fact, you've simply been idle too long in comfort. The longer you linger there, the heavier action becomes. The man who feeds comfort for too many nights wakes weaker though he slept deeply. Yet the one who sits upright in deliberate discomfort, breathes steady, eyes clear, discovers energy not from caffeine or reward, but from returning his mind to alignment. This is the ancient paradox. When you forget yourself, you find strength. When you serve comfort, you lose form. Mushin teaches that the moment you surrender your need to feel a certain way, practice begins. You stop training for the mind and start training with it. Feeling weak, then, is no command to stop. It's a signal that training has finally reached the mind. The body's complaints are the gatekeepers of mastery. The instant you accept that each flicker of fatigue is merely comfort dying inside you, you step into the sacred work of warriors, polishing the self through friction until clarity shines through. The modern world calls this overtraining. The ancients called it awakening. They knew that a dull sword can shine if rubbed long enough against stone, and a tired soul can reignite if kept steady in the fire practice. If weakness is a signal, then how did the warriors systemize it into power? Every warrior knew that chaos on the battlefield was never conquered through strength alone. It was conquered through system, through a structure of mind so steady that even exhaustion bent before it. Modern men lose themselves to sensation, chasing new tools, new hacks, new bursts of motivation. The samurai trained within a clear inner technology, one designed not to remove weakness but to refine it into rhythm. This is a warrior system. Grounding, the discipline of stillness, the small cut, the discipline of steady improvement, and the cleansing, the discipline of ritual repetition. Together they form a machine for mastering energy, a living loop that turns depletion into momentum. First comes a grounding, born from what they called Seiza, the practice of kneeling in formal stillness before any act. The warrior didn't rush into motion. He anchored his awareness into his own breath. In those moments before the first strike, before pen met paper or blade left sheath, the entire universe condensed to posture, spine tall, eyes soft, lungs deliberate. His presence wasn't passive, it was command. Modern men rarely breathe consciously at all, suffocating beneath invisible haste. Yet one breath done with intention can restore order to chaos. It's how warriors transform fatigue into focus. When weak, sit, not as avoidance, but as reignition. 2 minutes of silent sitting before work or training resets the ancient circuitry. Each inhale becomes an order, each exhale an execution. The principle is simple. One breath equals one command to the body. Perhaps that's why the samurai would rather die with perfect posture than live with a scattered spine, because posture anchors spirit. When you sit in full awareness, you announce your weakness. I'm still commander here. The body listens, and movement follows. Then comes a small cut, the silent genius of endurance. They called it the art of Kaizen long before the factories and efficiency books, an understanding that mastery is built through the smallest consistent movements. When strength fades, the modern man stops. The warrior simply shrinks the target. Do one repetition. Sharpen the blade once. Write one clean sentence. The samurai sharpened their sword every single day, not to kill more efficiently, but to prevent decay through neglect. It was an act of devotion. In a world obsessed with grand transformations, Kaizen maintains sacred simplicity. Improvement, even microscopic, sustains identity. When the muscles ache, when the mind resists, he whispers, just one deliberate cut. Because the act of doing, however small, keeps the fire lit. It is the antidote to paralysis. A dull edge doesn't need fury. It needs friction. Each tiny repetition, done sincerely, preserves the link between you and discipline. Modern exhaustion thrives in overestimation, believing we must do more to feel worthy. The warrior knew better. Consistency breeds strength, not intensity. The river cut stone not by force, but by persistence. Last comes a cleansing, what they knew as Kata. To an outsider, Kata seems repetitive, ceremonial, even redundant, the same motion practiced thousands of times. Yet through this ritual, the warrior purified his mind from emotion. The intent wasn't to perfect the form itself, but to transcend the need for emotion to fuel it. In tiredness, repetition becomes redemption. He performed the swing, the stance, the sequence, not to impress, but to dissolve identity into the action. This is a hidden function of routine, a fixed morning ritual, a stretch, a breath, a handwritten page becomes a modern kata. You do it not because you feel inspired, but because the repetition carries you when willpower falters. Repetition is a rope you hold onto when waves of fatigue pull. When you repeat with sincerity, the brain's noise slows. Rhythm returns. Emotion softens. Spirit renews. The world says variety keeps things interesting. The samurai knew that monotony polishes the self until it shines through any mood. If you cannot polish the sword, they said, then polish your breathing. The metaphor reaches beyond technique. It's a philosophy of humility. When you cannot train at full capacity, train at full sincerity. When your energy is low, refine your awareness. The craft responds to devotion more than strength. The man who pauses in frustration corrodes. The man who moves in imperfection purifies. In every expression of the warrior system, weakness becomes raw material, not a curse, but clay for transformation. Grounding provides control. The small cut ensures momentum. The cleansing reclaims clarity. The loop feeds itself endlessly. Sit, breathe, do one small thing. Repeat until pure. What emerges isn't a burst of motivation, but flow, a state where difficulty no longer resists you because your identity aligns with motion itself. Flow isn't magic. It's a result of removing argument from action. Feeling tired stops being an obstacle because there is no one left to debate whether you will move. You simply move. That's what the samurai reached in the void before battle. No mind, no hesitation, no emotion driving him. Just practice manifesting through flesh. That's the ultimate art, to act without waiting for agreement from the weaker parts of yourself. The warrior system isn't designed to make life easier. It's meant to remove the self that complains when it feels hard. It takes what modern men call burnout and translates it back into rhythm. Each of its three pieces is a counterpoint to our current disease. Stillness against chaos, micro-movement against overwhelm, repetition against distraction. Practice them long enough and you stop needing to believe in motivation entirely. You simply live the pattern. The world keeps spinning toward comfort, and you, sitting straight-spined in quiet defiance, will find your flow again not by chasing energy, but by organizing weakness into method. But systems mean nothing if emotion remains untrained. So how did? They forge the will itself. Resistance is the birthplace of the real man. It's the invisible fire that either burns your excuses or devours your spirit, depending on how you stand in front of it. Every morning when you wake and hesitate, that subtle tightening in your chest is a forge. The modern mind calls it stress, labels it anxiety, interprets it as a sign to pause. But the samurai called it invitation. Under Bushido, the code that governed their lives, pain wasn't an error in the system. It was feedback from the soul. They didn't numb it. They listened. To the warrior, pain was the mirror that revealed distortion. Every discomfort reflected something unaligned. Ego too loud, gratitude too shallow, purpose too clouded. Where the ordinary man asks, how can I escape this feeling? The warrior asks, what is this feeling trying to forge in me? Bushido demanded that order begin within before it could manifest outside. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was a decision to step forward while fear still whispered. Endurance wasn't numbness. It was reverence for the lesson hidden within suffering. The samurai saw resistance not as a wall but as fire, and their task was to temper themselves until they could stand inside it calmly, unburned. They believed that every hardship was sent to reveal weakness for purification. That's the emotional alchemy of will, transforming reaction into responsibility. Each time you face difficulty, you are handed a mirror. Weakness shown isn't failure, it's invitation to refine. To master that alchemy, they practice a nightly ritual known in Zen circles as Niken inner reflection. As the day dissolved into silence, the warrior would ask himself 3 simple questions. What have I received today? What have I given? What trouble have I caused? No rationalization, no complaint, just total honesty. Through those questions, gratitude replaced entitlement. A man couldn't claim fatigue while realizing how much he was still given. Food, shelter, breath, a body capable of motion. He couldn't linger in self-pity while seeing what little he had offered compared to what he received. And he couldn't cling to pride after acknowledging what trouble he caused others. These 3 reflections carved humility into the mind nightly, resetting arrogance into reverence. Burnout often hides secret arrogance, this belief that you are carrying too much, that the world owes you recovery for your effort. Niken reverses this. It reminds you that every breath is already given, that contribution is the only repayment worthy of existence. Through constant reflection, agitation turns into awareness, and awareness transforms into strength. The man who ends each day by confronting himself no longer fears resistance. It's his map. His will grows not from avoiding pain, but from understanding it. Bushido and Niken together turn suffering from a weight into a guidepost. Whatever hurts points directly to the next evolution of character. The burning in your chest when you hesitate isn't punishment. It's a call to duty. This marks a shift between identities. The old mindset says, I need the right conditions to feel strong. It waits for inspiration, sleep, validation, calm. It bargains for comfort before action. But the warrior's mindset says, I create strength by aligning with duty, not indulgence. Duty gives shape to chaos. Duty erases a debate between want and must. Strength doesn't appear when things feel right. It appears the moment you move in obedience to what is right. The modern man must rebuild his world around micro-duties, small sacred movements that require no permission. Wake, move, breathe, right. Each one is a declaration that the will outrunks the mood. When the alarm rings and you rise, you're not just starting a day, you're forging an identity. When you train though the body resists, you're refining moral muscle. Small acts of duty, done consistently, make the will unbreakable, because they create a life where obedience to purpose replaces dependence on emotion. Resistance, then, isn't the enemy. It's a teacher revealing how honest your discipline truly is. Burnout says, stop, you've done enough. Duty says, continue until alignment returns. The first lead to comfort's prison. The second leads to clarity's freedom. When gratitude and humility are carved into practice, resistance loses its poison. It becomes creative fire. Each struggle is proof that you're alive enough to be tested, strong enough to be trusted. The samurai didn't pray for ease. They prayed for worthiness of struggle. And when their strength broke, they didn't question their path. They purified themselves again in reflection, breathing until their heart found rhythm. Still, every warrior crashes. So what happens when you truly have nothing left? Every system, no matter how strong, eventually bends toward collapse. The body wears down, the mind rebels, the fire dims. It happens quietly at first, a delayed alarm, a skip ritual, a training session postponed with the promise of tomorrow. Soon the pattern fractures, and a man who once moved with precision becomes a shadow of motion, floating through days without pulse or presence. The myth of the invincible warrior dies here, at the border of exhaustion and identity. Because a true warrior is not the one who never falls, but the one who understands that collapse is not corruption, it is initiation. There's an old story of a Ronin, a masterless swordsman, who after his lord's defeat wandered through villages stripped of title, weapon hidden beneath worn cloth. Children mocked him, merchants ignored him, and without his armor he felt invisible. At first he cursed his fate, wondering what honor meant once stripped of recognition. But as the months passed, he realized something terrifying. The identity he mourned was built not on practice, but on attention. His strength had been borrowed from the world's reflection. Without it, He felt hollow. So he began again, not with jewels or displays, but with quiet repetition. His sword remained sheathed. His focus returned to his breath, to the way his feet pressed into the dirt as he walked, to the humble precision of teapot and silence. Slowly, as being realigned around a truth he had forgotten, practice is alive only when detached from witness. This was a doorway into Shugyo, the austere training that purified intention through deprivation. Shugyo was more than physical grind. It was spiritual crucible. It demanded one continue the form of discipline when all reward was removed. The Ronin discovered that stripping himself of title and recognition was not punishment. It was release. He learned to labor without audience, to bow to form with no promise of progress. Shugyo taught him that weakness was not failure but exposure. It showed where he still expected something in return for his effort. When that expectation was burned out, what remained was pure practice, the soul polishing itself against hardship. Modern men call this stage burnout, and they prescribe escape, travel, rest, distraction, anything that promises temporary reprieve from pressure. But the warrior's code disagrees. Collapse is never a cue to run. It's a command to simplify. When you hit the wall, you don't need reinvention. You need return. Return to breath. Return to posture. Return to motion stripped of ambition. You are not required to move with intensity, only with sincerity. Burnout culture says, do less, feel better. The warrior path says, do what is essential and let everything else die. Simplification is a higher sophistication of discipline, because through it, the unnecessary parts of you burn away, and only essence remains. The modern warrior must learn this art of sacred retraction. When collapse arrives, and it will, he must not interpret it as the end of practice, but as the start of true keiko, training conducted without external validation. The collapse cleanses. It exposes what was false strength and forces the bone of determination to surface. This is where responsibility replaces identity. You are no longer the man who trains because it looks noble. You train because existence itself demands it. When stripped of title, praise, followers, metrics, status, what remains is a rhythm of your breath and the motion of your craft. If you can still bow, still move, still breathe deliberately, then you have not lost anything essential. The Ronin's awakening becomes our mirror. Collapse reveals the attachments we built around practice, the desire for results, the illusion of progress as identity. When these fall away, the code remains: simplicity, honesty, endurance. Shugyo is a reminder that suffering isn't the price of greatness, it's a purification of ego. That's why every real warrior eventually breaks, to find that what breaks isn't him, but the illusion he held of himself. Purified by collapse, the warrior rises into effortless presence, a final mode. Real power is silent. It does not grind or strain or perform. It moves like breath, steady, invisible, sovereign. After the fires of resistance and the collapses of humility, the warrior eventually meets a strange calm. What once felt heavy now feels weightless, and what once required will now happen as instinct. This is a paradox of mastery, when discipline ceases to feel like work, and simply is. The ancients called this state wu-wei, effortless action. It isn't passivity, nor indifference. It is movement so perfectly aligned with truth that it no longer meets friction. The warrior has burned away every unnecessary motion, every delay, every excuse. What remains is purity of doing. The blade no longer trembles. It simply rests, ready. Miyamoto Musashi called this final refinement the void stance, a posture where awareness fills everything and effort disappears. You act, yet it feels as though the universe itself moves through you. This shift doesn't arrive suddenly. It is a product of repetition beyond emotion, 1,000 unnoticed mornings where you sat through fatigue, performed through boredom, and breathed when you wanted to flee. Each repetition etched a new identity until action stopped needing reason. You no longer train to become disciplined. Training is who you are. The mind and body, once adversaries, now move in a single rhythm. Inhale presence, exhale action. When the modern man describes discipline, he often means struggle. When the warrior speaks of it, he means integration. There is no more negotiation between duty and desire, because duty has become desire. The sword moves without thought. The path continues without planning. The will flows without pulling. True mastery is the moment you forget you're practicing. You are no longer a man forcing habits. You are a man who has become the habit itself. The daily rituals that once felt restrictive now feel like home. Sitting still before work isn't a tactic. It's a return to source. One small task completed isn't an achievement. It's breathing. Reflection isn't guilt. It's balance. Simplification isn't withdrawal. It's liberation. And so the warrior system completes itself, looping eternally through harmony. Sit, breathe, act small, reflect, simplify, repeat. These 6 steps form an internal wheel that turns whether you feel strong or weak. The system trains itself through you, guided by the same still rhythm that governs the tides in the heart. The man who reaches a stage moves through life unhurried but unstoppable. His silence intimidates not because it's cold, but because it's mastered. He wastes no energy explaining his discipline. He simply embodies it. Each gesture carries finality, each word precision. Strength, distilled of conflict, becomes peace. Effort, repeated enough, becomes art. In this stillness, all contradictions dissolve. The fighter becomes healer, the grind becomes grace, the motion becomes meditation. This is a still blade, sharp, calm, effortless. Now the question, how do you live this? Not just know it. Mastery begins in silence, but it must unfold in motion, within the chaos of cities and screens. The ancient traditions are not to be worshipped like relics. They are to be lived, adapted, and carried into the noise of our modern world. The samurai trained among mountains and moonlight. You train among notifications and deadlines. Yet the principle remains eternal. Mastery is not about where you practice, but how. To live as a modern warrior, you must stitch invisible rituals into the fabric of ordinary life. It starts in the first minutes of morning, the morning Seiza. 2 minutes of silent grounding before the day attacks. Sit tall, eyes forward, inhale as though commanding your mind to assemble. These 120 seconds are the threshold between chaos and clarity. Before the first message, before the first decision, you anchor posture and breath. In that stillness, direction forms. This is where the world's noise finds its limit, and your authority begins. You don't need incense or temples, just presence, spine straight, lungs steady. It's in this quiet that you tell yourself, action will arise from stillness, not panic. When energy falters midday, remember the Kaizen discipline. When the day feels heavy, don't chase a fire, strike a spark. Do the smallest decisive action. Reply to a single message with precision. Perform one. Deliberate set in the gym. Open the notebook, write one meaningful line. Small cuts sharpen the soul. This habit transforms weakness into continuity, preserving momentum through the simplicity of motion. The blade stays sharp not because it cut dramatically, but because it never stopped refining. Discipline is not grand. It is granular. As night falls, the night in reflection becomes your mental cleansing. Ask yourself 3 questions. What have I received today? What have I given? What trouble have I caused? They sound simple, but they pierce deep. You realize how supported you truly are, how little you actually give and retain, and how easily small moments of neglect ripple outward. The exercise humbles you, disarms entitlement, and restores gratitude. It cleans your emotional weapon. Each reflection dulls the ego's acid that builds through the day, ensuring you meet the next morning cleansed of pride's residue. Gratitude is the armor of peace. Without it, strength rots into resentment. Yet even with anchoring and reflection, the modern warrior must guard against overwhelm. When commitments multiply and purpose blurs, invoke the 4th principle, Shugyo simplification. This is the art of pruning. In moments of overload, don't run to ease, return to essence. Cut the unnecessary. Fewer goals, fewer words, fewer distractions. Strip your world until all that remains is clear alignment. When the samurai entered austerity, they shed luxury to polish perception. You can do the same. Delete, unsubscribe, decline, and feel power return. In simplification, you rediscover control not through addition, but subtraction. The rhythm is complete. Sit, breathe, act small, reflect, simplify, repeat. It is not a program. It is a way to live. A loop that requires no motivation, only sincerity. When followed daily, this pattern rewires identity itself. You begin to understand a quiet mantra that lives at the heart of all warriors. Training is breathing. Every action, however mundane, is a form of training. Writing an email? Practice clarity. Walking down the street? Practice posture. Listening to someone speak? Practice presence. Training never ends because life never pauses. Ordinary tasks become rituals when performed deliberately. This is how the past embeds itself into the present, not through imitation, but through integration. The dojo becomes your daily schedule. The sword becomes your decisions. You walk, breathe, move as part of an unbroken lineage of focused men who refuse to drift. When the ancient systems dissolve into your modern patterns, you no longer feel conflict between the fast world and the timeless self. You anchor one inside the other, calm in the storm, efficient yet grounded. When the old path becomes your daily rhythm, you awaken as a modern samurai. There comes a moment when theory must end. You have read, learned, watched, hesitated, and now the silence stands before you like a mirror. In it, your reflection asks a final question. Will you remain the man who waits to feel ready, or become the one who acts from readiness itself? The dawn light spills across your face, pale and unpromising. It doesn't care about your moods or history. Yet in that quiet, something inside moves, a small, commanding pulse. You straighten your spine. You settle your breath. And you whisper to the reflection, not a wish, but a vow. Weakness will no longer dictate movement. It will trigger it. Each moment of fatigue, doubt, confusion, or fear will now be the signal, not the excuse to act. You recognize that the enemy has never been tired muscles or busy schedules, but hesitation. From this moment, hesitation ends. You will breathe once, act once, repeat. The world waits for inspiration, drowning in plans and half-finished resolutions. But the warrior does not wait. He moves from presence. Presence means there is no argument left inside you. No waiting, no bracing, no need for validation. Just a calm execution born from stillness. You've trained in breath, reflection, simplicity. Now the loop is complete. Identity has shifted. Discipline is not something you apply, it's something you are. Write your declaration. It may be public, a statement to brothers, friends, the world. All private, a sentence sealed in a notebook, breathed into the walls of your room. But make it binding. Words spoken with full spirit have the weight of steel. Declare that every act you perform from this point forward will be done with the precision of a blade drawn once, cleanly. You no longer dabble. You dedicate. You no longer chase motivation. You live motion. And as you stand there, still, the sound of your own breath returns, the same breath that filled warriors before battle, the same silence they stepped through toward destiny. It is a first and last weapon, the pulse beneath every strike, the proof of life itself. Hold it, feel it, release it. Strength does not roar. It hums quietly beneath composure. The breath softens, the dawn brightens, and the man before the mirror is no longer the same.